Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're gonna be answering your top questions on Venetian Plaster. So we just wanted to kind of collect some of the main top most asked questions that we get on YouTube and kind of put them into one video. These aren't gonna be like all the questions, but hopefully this will just be kind of a quick video to help you on your journey to learning and understanding Venetian plaster. So first question is, how much plaster do you need per square foot? This is a great question because when you're starting out, it's kind of hard to determine like how much am I gonna need. Typically what you're gonna wanna do first is determine what style of plaster you wanna do. So whether that's like shiny or matte or whatever texture you wanna do. And then you can determine what product you wanna use. The products themselves will have the coverage rates on them. So for example, we love using Marmara KS, and that has a coverage rate of 8 to 10 square feet per kilo. And so if you have like a 200 square foot room, then you would need 20 kilos. So that's kind of how you determine that. I found the coverage rates to be pretty accurate. So, oh, we have UPS. We found the coverage rates to be pretty accurate. So I would just go ahead and follow the coverage rates on the product. It really just depends on what product you're using. When we first started out, we used this San Marco product that was super thick, and that had like half the coverage rate as Marmara KS did. So it went on really thick, and you had to just get twice as much. So it really just depends on kind of your product. So check the product and go by that rate. So the next question is, where can you buy this Venetian plaster? We link most of the stuff down in our description. So if you're interested, check out the description of this video. We have links to all the products that we use. If you're interested in different products, let us know and we can help you find that. We love using the Nova Color products. And here in the US, a brand called Frenzy Color sells the Nova Color products. So we love ordering our stuff from them. They can tint it to whatever color you want, and they're really helpful in figuring out what you need for your project. So if you're interested and you live in the US, check out Frenzy Color. Again, links will be down below if you're interested. Does Venetian plaster need to be sealed? Technically, I guess not. It's definitely not something that has to be sealed, but you probably are gonna wanna seal it. The reason is that you're applying this stone kind of product and it's porous, so it absorbs things. So when you touch it with your oily hands or you spill anything on it, it's gonna absorb right into the product, so into your walls. So it really is important that you seal this because it's expensive and you spend all this time applying it, so you might as well go ahead and seal it. So a common sealer we use is protection soap, which is essentially just soap that you apply on your wall, and that gives it kind of a layer of protection and sealant. But that's really for mild kind of sealant application. So we use it like in our walls right here in our living room, which is a great place to do that. If you needed something a little bit more aggressive, I think. Aqua de Vertro. I think it's called Aqua de Vertro. And if you apply that onto your product, it'll give it kind of more of a, like when water gets on it, it'll be a little bit more hydrophobic, meaning it'll kind of bead up and you'll be able to wash it off a little bit better. So there's different options for kind of making your product more or less sealed. It really depends on what you're trying to do. So again, it's just kind of use case. You gotta figure out what product you want to use. You gotta figure out where it's gonna go, and then you can kind of determine what sealer you need. So it really depends. Yes, you should probably seal your plaster. The next question is, how long should you wait to apply your final coat of plaster? So it depends on what type of plaster you're using, whether that'll be your second or third coat. But let's just assume that you have applied the other coats first and you're gonna apply your final coat. Again, this would be when your product is fully dry. So typically you'll know when that happens is when you apply product on wet, it'll kind of look like kind of dark and light and kind of have this kind of cool look to it. But when it dries, it'll be a little bit more uniform. So usually when it's uniform color, that is usually when it's fairly dry. So that's kind of when I, kind of know that it's okay, it looks dry, the wall's dry, it's ready for its final coat. But you just kind of gonna have to determine that for yourself and what kind of temperature your room is and what air you're putting on it and all those situations. So those kind of things will affect your dry time. So you're just gonna have to figure out and see for yourself. But typically I like waiting at least half a day just to kind of let it dry. Most of the time I wait overnight just because I have the luxury of time. But if you're pressed for time, you can use fans to kind of speed up the drying process. But yeah, typically it'll be kind of more of a flat finish until you do that final coat with the compression and the burnishing and all that sort of good thing. What types of boards do we use for our kind of practice boards? So this is a great question. You can kind of use anything. Typically, you just want the board to be flat. We use MDF boards. Those tend to be just kind of the cheapest and the easiest to pick up, and they're already flat, but you can really just use anything that's flat. We've even taken boards, skim coated them, and then used those. So it really just is up to you with what you want to use. But yeah, we usually use MDF boards, and then we'll prime that with our quartz primer, and then that's when we usually go ahead and apply our product. I will say though, if you get like kind of a very cheap, like for example, we got this, like our first board was this chip board, and we thought we could just kind of skim coat over it, but then the skim coat was, the color of the wood was coming through, and it was just not a very good thing. So if you do have a random board, make sure to prime it, then skim coat it, and make sure everything's kind of like sealed in. But then it should be fine to use. But typically, yeah, MDF's probably the easiest way if you're gonna actually go buy a piece of wood, MDF. But if you, already have a piece of wood laying around or you have a board, feel free to use that. How do you avoid chatter when applying Venetian plaster? This is a great question because we have struggled with that before. It's definitely something that's kind of like hard to kind of figure out, like, why is it happening? What's going on? So typically chatter happens when you're applying plaster and the aggregate in the plaster is thicker than you're trying to apply it on. So meaning you're trying to apply it on too thin and the aggregate's causing your trowel to kind of go up and down really quick. In that case, you just need to apply it thicker. That's usually the cause of chatter, is you're applying it probably too thin. So that usually solves the issue. A lot of your first coat is gonna determine the look of the second coat. So don't just skip ahead thinking, oh, I'll just go over it again and it won't come through. Definitely make sure you get it right on your first coat. Make sure these coats are really nice and uniform if that's what you're going for. But yeah, typically if you're getting chatter or getting a lot of like bumpy movement, apply it a little thicker. That should kind of solve your issue. Again, typically is when you have that aggregate in it. So different plasters are gonna chatter easier than other ones that are a little bit thinner or finer or whatever it is. So there you have it. What trowels should you buy when you're starting out? This kind of depends on your budget, really. If you have the budget to just buy a nicer trowel, I would go ahead and do that. I'll show you guys what we started out with. We started out with this trowel right here, and this was a pretty good trowel. We've actually plastered multiple rooms with this and used it for multiple things. This was probably more on the just kind of the more cheaper end of things, but it works really well. But if you have the money, I would just go ahead and get something like this. We love these trap style trowels a little bit better. Main reason is this point can allow you to get into the corners a little bit easier. And this one's treated to not leave black marks on lighter colored plasters. So if you're doing like kind of whiter or more neutral colored plasters that are a little bit brighter, this is a great way to go because it'll avoid you applying any black marks. This is also really good for beginners because your wall's probably not gonna be perfectly smooth. You're not used to applying the plaster in rooms that well. So this kind of helps you avoid any of those common mistakes as a beginner. I feel like those black marks kind of, we applied it in one room and we did get black marks. And I didn't know of these tools, so I think I would have been really happy to just go ahead and buy this. But again, really depends on your budget. This is more expensive for sure, but if you're interested, again, we'll link these things below. But this is the X trowel, which is special treated for those black marks and lighter plaster. Another trowel that you can consider buying, if you, again, have the budget, is a burnishing trowel. You can definitely burnish with your main trowel as well, but a burnishing trowel will allow you to apply a little bit more even pressure when you're burnishing your last coat. And that's kind of nice just to have a second trowel to keep clean and be ready to burnish when you're doing that when you're working on the wall. So again, kind of depends on your budget. If you have the money, go ahead and buy the nicer trowel if you think this is something you're gonna get into. If you're not really sure and you're just kind of figuring things out like we were, go ahead and buy the cheaper trowel. Not gonna be a problem. It's not gonna change anything that much. It doesn't really change the way you apply it per se, or like learn or feel of it, but it does kind of give you a little bit more flexibility when you're going to do it. Can I plaster on textured walls or do I need a skim coat? So it depends on how how textured your wall is. Typically, like if you have like an orange peel or something like that, the wall's been painted or whatever, and it has a little bit of that orange peel look, then like a coarser Venetian plaster like Marmor KS or Casse Cruda or Marmor Fine or any of those type of things will go right over that, no big deal. But if you're applying a finer Venetian plaster, like one of the shiny Venetian plasters, such as like Gristello Fino, you're gonna want to make sure your wall is perfectly smooth. The reason being is that it's so fine that any texture is gonna come through and any imperfection in the wall is really gonna be noticeable. So typically they say you should have a level 5 finish. That just means that your walls have been fully skim coated and are fully smooth. But the other plasters, you can probably get away with a lesser of a finish. My theory of applying Venetian plaster is that you should waste as little Venetian plaster as possible. So if you have holes or divots or anything like that, go ahead and skim coat. Like, it's so much cheaper to apply the skim coat than it will be to apply the Venetian plaster. So just go ahead and do that, and then waste less of your Venetian plaster on filling in holes or fixing imperfections in the wall. So, and that'll just give you the best results anyway. So yeah, probably skim coat, but again, if you have good looking walls and there's a little bit of orange peel or something like that, it's totally fine to just go ahead and apply your Venetian plaster. Do I need to prime my wall? I would. I guess if that's what we're asking, I would say yes. Priming your wall just kind of helps seal in things. It gives it your Venetian plaster something to adhere to. So if you're applying a coarser Venetian plaster, quartz primer is a really good way to do that. It primes the wall and gives it a little bit of texture to grab onto. So it gives it kind of that more mechanical, kind of like if you think of like old lath and plaster, where that kind of went into kind of created some teeth. This is kind of doing that on a very small scale where the texture of the wall kind of feels like sandpaper. And then you apply the Venetian plaster on. When the Venetian plaster dries, it kind of shrinks up and grabs onto the wall. And so that kind of just gives that really good adhesion. So it's recommended, definitely. I think you can get away without it if you really didn't want to. But again, it's kind of like you're doing something kind of expensive, so you might as well just take the extra precautions and like do it the right way. So I recommend priming your wall for something like a Gristello Fino or the finer Venetian plasters, or maybe like a metallic Venetian plaster. You can just prime it with like a normal paint primer that you would if you were painting a wall. Or you can use the Novolux E, which is a really great primer for those type of projects as well. So that's all the questions we're gonna get to today. But if you have more questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. We love chatting with you guys down there. And if you thought this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more Venetian plaster tips and tricks. So stay tuned for more videos coming up, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.